All right, guys, here we go. We've got Frankie Scoops in the house today, so let's just get this thing popping right off the start. Thank you for coming so much.
Yeah, no worries. Pleasure to be here.
We have gone back and forth on Twitter way too much. First time meeting in person. You've got more energy in real life than on Twitter, so I'm excited about this.
Big scoop energy. That's what they call me.
All right, so let's go through your background. Most people don't know that how young you are and kind of how you got into the media side of crypto.
Yeah, I am pretty young, which is surprising because of all of my mannerisms that would otherwise suggest that I'm like 67 years old. But it all started in college at WFUV. I got into radio, got into telling stories, got into the news. First in politics, so going down to City Hall, writing up stories on really pedantic City Hall type things that really started to bore me after a while. And I found a respite in writing about business news. And there's less sort of vitriol in business news in a sense. And it's funny that I ended up finding my way to crypto because there's tons of vitriol in crypto. But the thing that I liked about business was it was a lot less bullcrap in a sense, a lot less fighting back and forth, a lot more building things and figuring out how we can build things that people want to buy. And so I ended up finding myself at NASDAQ as a marketing corporate communications intern. Really learned about capital markets for the first time, market formation, market structure, initial public offerings, the stock market, all those things that I really hadn't been exposed to in my studies because I was studying theology and sort of international political economy. And I fell in love with the best part of my job when I was marketing at NASDAQ wasn't necessarily the job itself, but waking up in the morning, reading the Wall Street Journal, listening to Bloomberg Radio. And after that was done, I decided this is what I want to do. I want to tell stories that will, make an impact on Wall Street and in the business world. And had a great opportunity to intern at BI, which started out, basically they threw me into the wolf's den, covering whatever I wanted, talking to entrepreneurs. I think because of my sort of demeanor as a 60-year-old trapped in a 23-year-old body or a 23-year-old trapped in a 60-year-old body. Thank God this is podcast and not television because I have the face for the former. And I really was able to build a name for myself. And quickly after a couple months, and especially after they brought me on full time, I was talking to people like the president of the New York Stock Exchange and the founder of IEX and massively important folks on Wall Street. And it wasn't until I came on full time that they sort of said, all right, we need someone to write about this Bitcoin thing. And I said, Bitcoin? Crypto? I want to be taken seriously as a financial journalist. I don't want to write about magic internet money all day.
Yep.
And their response basically was, well, you're going to be writing about magic internet money all day because the thing's exploding. This was right around May 2017, right after I'd graduated from Fordham, and they needed someone to really pick up the coverage because the thing was exploding as far as impressions were concerned in terms of the editors asking questions. I remember someone came to me at Business Insider at the time and said, what is Ethereum? We need someone to write about what Ethereum is because the Google trend traffic is off the charts. And it was off the charts, if you remember. It's down now along with the price. And so really just dove into the thing, and the rest is sort of history. But it was really accidental, in a sense, being at the right place at the right time. And it was over the course of the next, I'd say 6 months as the thing exploded, was finding a niche at the intersection of this crazy crypto world and Wall Street. What are the people on Wall Street doing? And at the time, they really underplayed it. So we're talking September, October, November, right around the time when Jamie Dimon called this thing a fad, right? Mm-hmm. I was thinking, all right, but what are they doing with it? And I thought the place that made the most sense to go to were the exchanges, because when we think about blockchain technology and where it can have the biggest impact, obviously on capital formation, so the IPO process could be disrupted by something like an ICO or an security token offering, an STO. And obviously, trading can be impacting. You have things like decentralized exchanges that supplement matching, bringing together buyers and sellers. And so I wanted to see if they were positioning themselves, places like NYSE, NASDAQ, CBOE, CME, how they were positioning themselves to take advantage and monetize this revolution in a sense. And at the time, I mean, no one really, they didn't seem like they had an idea, right? We're looking at it. We're thinking about it. We look at all technologies. But really, I mean, now we know a year later, right?
They were all in.
They were all in, and they were all in for a while, right? And so at the time when I was thinking about the impact that futures could have, Bitcoin futures on the market, I went to all the analysts who cover the exchanges. So, the investment bankers who are writing up stock report analysts for their, asset management clients to see how they can, the ones that set the price targets, right? For your listeners who might not understand what investment bankers, some of them do. And I went to them and said, listen, what do you think the revenue opportunity is here? Bank of America had put out a report at the time, this was around November, October, that said that, one, Bitcoin futures could help dampen volatility, which kind of didn't really happen if you think about it. But also there was a 10% revenue something for exchanges. So I went to other folks covering the stock, and they had, not only did they really not understand what Bitcoin was, but they hung up the phone on me. They said, this is ridiculous. The exchanges aren't going to do anything in this space. I don't see what the opportunity is here. How off they were, here we are now with NASDAQ potentially looking to do something with cryptocurrency exchanges. They're supplying market surveillance technology to, I think, at this point, 5 cryptocurrency firms. And so it really is a horse of a different color. And to really bring the point home of how much it's changed since I first started covering it, I remember asking a year ago a very high up executive at one of the exchanges, how big of an opportunity is this? And basically he echoed the same thing that Jamie Dimon said. It's a fad. It's dangerous. Here we are now. Here we know that
they're all in.
They're all in, yeah.
Yeah. So okay, so let's talk about the state of the media in crypto, right? So I kind of bucket it in a couple of different categories. So you've got kind of legacy media, which is CNBC, Bloomberg, mainstream media, et cetera. Then you've got what I would consider crypto specific media, which is the CoinDesks, the CCNs, Cointelegraph, et cetera. And then you have this like citizen journalists, right? Which are like all the people on Twitter, Reddit, Medium, et cetera, that are basically reporting the ground truth. How do you see those three interacting, and like what is the state of each one of them?
Well, I think it's interesting because as far as legacy media is concerned, I think there are so many topics that journalists have to cover that it really just does become about the price and how traditional institutions are viewing this space, right? And it's all sort of in that lens, which underserves a lot of the folks who have been in it for a really long time, since 2008, since the beginning, or maybe since 2012. And so that in and of itself, up until I'd say a year ago, where you have some really fine journalists at places like Bloomberg and Business Insider and the New York Times, up until a year ago, most of the stories either had to do with price or the culture of these cyberpunks, et cetera. Mm-hmm. That's changed, and I think we've seen a lot of legacy media really dive into this and pick apart issues ranging from technology, trading, and others. But that gap from the beginning, where a lot of this was sort of viewed as a fly-by-night sort of thing, allowed for a lot of these medium-type folks to come up, a lot of vloggers, a lot of podcasters, a lot of writers who are also trading this stuff and investing in this stuff to fill a gap and really get granular on the technology side. And I think now you have those types of folks along with traditional media, but at the same time, and this is a recent phenomenon too, a Cambrian explosion, if you will, of crypto media publications.
Yep.
That, to be honest and to be frank, no pun intended, the pun was very much intended, there are a lot of these crypto publications that don't know how journalism works. They don't know how sourcing works. And there's a lot that I think, I'm very skeptical of who these crypto first publications outside of CoinDesk. I mean, they have great folks working on great stories. But outside of that, I'm very skeptical of where they're getting their information from and the due diligence they're doing to really make sure the information they have is precise and well sourced.
So let's talk about this though, right? A bunch of us on Twitter have lovingly started calling you Frankie Scoops, right?
Yes.
Because you continue to publish scoop after scoop after scoop.
As my ego grows and grows and grows.
But let's walk through like the anatomy of a scoop, right? How do you...
Should we go through one that you helped me with? Or that's probably not for the best.
So let's talk through like how you find sources, right? How do you actually develop that source, learn to trust them, get information from them, and eventually publish something?
Well, that was the best thing, right, about the intersection that I was at. No one I don't want to say no one because that's a blanket statement, but very few journalists, I think, were actually looking at, well, let's talk to the market structure crypto expert at this Wall Street firm, as opposed to, the crypto first firms like, blockchain, or, a Circle or a Coinbase. I thought, let me go to the Chicago-based market making firms, New York Stock Exchange. Let me find their Bitcoin guys, their crypto guys, because no one's probably really talking to them because the attention is all on the crypto side, the crypto first side of things.
And so that's really your approach was, let me go to the established legacy players, the Wall Street type institutions. And if I start there, it's kind of a trickle down from, the well-established, well-known players all the way down to the individual startups.
And that's exactly what happened. So I started with let's say the head of digital assets at X Wall Street firm, and they were able to connect me and grow my base with actually the crypto first guy. So I started at Wall Street and then exactly as you sort of described, branch myself out to those other folks. And it's all about, the question is, how do you build trust? How do you make sure folks know that you're not going to burn them and that you're not going to, it's very easy, right? To talk to a journalist in one sense, but it's a scary thing. You don't want to lose your job and you just need to make sure that I need to make sure that the person I'm talking to knows that they can trust me and that I'm not going to, tell people things that they tell me off the record or on deep background. I'm not going to associate it with them. And it's about relationships and friendships and getting to know them on a personal level, going out for a cup of coffee or a drink of some sort, and really forming a relationship of shared information. I know things about the industry, have some insights. Some might call them insights that can help them at their job. And
so is this like, let's say you call up head of digital at a bank or wherever, first call, you're asking questions, that you want answers to that you can then use as information for a story? Or is it more of, hey, call them up, I want to get to know you, I think that we can build this long-lasting relationship? Like,
you don't want to just call them and be like, hey, listen, I know you're building this thing, you got to tell me everything you know about it. That's going to scare them, right?
Yep.
You kind of want to grease the wheels, the old foot in the door phenomenon, how are the wife and kids?
Yep.
I'm being tongue in cheek, but it's serious. That's part of the process. And so a lot of the time I hear something from someone like Anthony Pompliano might tell me that such and such is being built at X company. And I think, that's interesting. I can't just go write the story, right? Because Anthony might not know what the hell he's talking about.
You're gonna make me lose all of my friends over fake news right now.
You see, this is fake news. Anthony's not that helpful. Don't worry.
But hold on. So when you call these people though, because this is an important part, right? So you call them and you get information.
Sure.
How do you know that the information is true? And do you have to go get it from multiple people to confirm it, or how does that process work?
So the first thing I think about when I go into any call, right, is why would they tell me this, and how do they potentially benefit from telling me this?
Yep.
So I'll give you an example, and I think I can give this example. So when I broke that CBOE was really getting close to, or at least telling its market-making clients that it was getting close to launching Ether futures.
Yep.
I mean, I knew this was something that would move the price. And so the first market maker who told me, right, I'm thinking, well, why they want to tell me this? Maybe they have amassed a large position in Ethereum,
Yep.
and they would benefit from such a story. And so I think a lot of people in the crypto world don't think that really good journalists think about these questions. They just want to get the story out. But this is something that's really, really important to me. And so, yes, so just because such and such market maker told me that this was something that they had told him or her, I didn't go off of just that one source. And because of those questions that you have to think about. And so I went to another one, got the same exact story. All the details need to line up, because imprecision, even if it's a sentence, can radically change a story and radically can impact someone's money. And,
Absolutely.
No one gets a story right all the time. I reported, it was a really gangbuster report on Fidelity and their crypto efforts. And everyone knows that Abigail Johnson's really big into crypto. I had first reported they were hiring from internal, and this is, when folks send me stuff from inside the company, it makes the story process so easier, because it's just, you look at the documents, you read it, and you write it up. And so
it's like you've got paper evidence,
yeah,
right? Paper
evidence. That makes it great, because I can't point to my nameless source. I can just point to what I have in my hand. And so the job ads basically said, we're hiring for crypto custody and for projects related to digital asset exchange.
Yep.
So I followed up that report, because obviously people, when you put something out like that, they want to talk to you, or they want to give you more information to the story. And so I found out basically that they had a VC prop fund under a British subsidiary from which a number of folks, or that was created by a number of folks at the firm who had left. And I'm sure a lot of your listeners know who these folks are at Castle Island Ventures. And so basically, I think I talked to at least 5 or 6 people for this story. I mean, I really wanted to make sure I was getting it right, because this isn't something that Fidelity wants to talk about.
Yep.
And companies typically don't want to talk about things. And companies typically only want to tell you what they want to talk about, which is the hardest part of the job. And so the mistake I made, right, was that I had reported that the fund had shut, which was the language that was used by all my sources. Now, Fidelity calls me the next day and basically says the fund is inactive. Now, it kind of sounds like the same thing, right?
Yep.
But it's that sort of precision that, as a journalist, you don't always get it, but you want to get it every single time.
Because the difference there is, shut means is inactive in perpetuity, right? It's
Sure,
over.
sure,
And
it's
inactive
over.
could mean we have money still sitting here. We're not currently deploying it, but we may restart at some point in the future.
Exactly, which
Yeah.
is an important distinction. And, as a journalist, you're not always going to get it 100% right, but those are the questions, and those are the details, very specific details that you always want to go after. And so, a long way of answering your question, but tying back to crypto first media, a lot of the CoinDesk wannabes of the world are not, I think, precisely tackling stories in that way, where they're thinking about how they may be approaching it in a way that doesn't get at those tiny details that at the end of the day seem super tiny but make a huge difference on the impact.
So let me ask this question. Does anyone ever lie to you? Tell
totally.
me like the horror story, right? Of you've got a source, you've built some trust with them. They say, hey, Frank, I've got this awesome piece of information, and they lie. What
Honestly,
happens?
that typically doesn't happen. So
Okay.
it's not the folks that I've had established really great relationships with who will lie to me. Maybe they're just confused, maybe
yeah.
typically, and that's why you go to other people. It's something like, they heard something from a company, but they heard it a little bit off. Most of the time, it's the companies themselves that will literally lie to my face, or try to spin me in one direction or the other. And so one time I was reporting, Mike Dudas.
I want a good story. I want a good story.
This is a good story. So he calls me. So Mike calls me the LinkedIn assassin because I'm always reporting on folks from the crypto world going to Wall Street, or rather the other way around, people from Wall Street going to crypto. I think I reported on 5 at least from New York Stock Exchange going to Coinbase,
Yep.
right? Which, the assault just continues. But so there was one hire from a traditional Wall Street firm, a really senior guy was going to a really well-known cryptocurrency company.
Okay.
And so I had, recruiters are the best sources, by the way, because they know where people are going and they know for a fact that these things are happening. And so a really well-known, so a recruiter told me about a very well-known guy making this move. And so I knew without a doubt, but went to the company and basically they said, this isn't true, which puts me in a tough position because I have to think, all right, I only have this one guy who without a doubt knows, but they're basically telling me this hasn't happened. And on this one, I didn't go with my gut. I wrote the story, but just set it aside and said, I'll wait. And I think it was 4 or 5 weeks later.
So wait, so you wrote the story, but didn't publish it, and you put it in the drawer for later.
Yeah, because I was only 95% certain. And if there's that 5% uncertainty that's sitting in my gut, right? And so basically I went to the company, I said, this guy's coming on as X position is what my source tells me. And they said, well, we've talked to him. We've talked to a lot of people. The classic spin. Yeah, but he's not hired right now. So I was like, are you going to hire him? Well, no, we may not. We talked to a lot of people. And so that level of sort of doubt was enough to make me hold off for a little bit. So someone at the company ended up calling me 4 or 5 weeks later saying, Frank, that thing you were looking into 4 weeks ago, it was happening. And so, that's what confused me with when we put out that story on Goldman's ambitions and everyone on crypto Twitter started coming after me and saying, oh, well, the CFO said
hold on.
Yeah.
We got to back up and set this. So you wrote a story that said Goldman is, I believe your story said Goldman is going to shut down or is not going to launch the crypto trading desk that they had previously said they were going to do.
So that was what a lot of folks...
Is that the takeaway people had?
That's the takeaway people had. But the story itself was a little more detailed. And it was that custody has moved up the line and the trading of...
as a priority inside the bank.
And the trading of physical Bitcoin has sort of moved down the list, but they're trading, obviously, a ton of different derivatives tied to crypto, and they're trading futures, obviously. And so I think a lot of people interpreted the story as them completely scrapping all trading of all types of crypto-related assets, which obviously we did not report because that's not true. But I think a lot of people interpreted that as being the case. And so the CFO basically of Goldman said that our report, or he alluded to the report. Actually, he didn't really. He basically said that this sentiment is fake news. And a lot of people took that as meaning that my report or Business Insider's report was fake news.
So you wrote this report. Everyone goes wild on Twitter, mainstream media. People start trying to correlate the story
with the
price movement,
which is ridiculous. And so CNBC, for instance, they reported that Bitcoin tanks $500 a coin after Business Insider report about Goldman's crypto strategy, when Bitcoin tanked an hour and a half before our report went out. And so this just speaks to the degree of misinformation. And I think when Mike was on, he spoke to a lot of these issues. And that's part of the reason why I'm joining the block, is to create and help create a center, a hub for people to go to where they can get out of this ridiculous misinformation chaos.
Absolutely.
To actually find some sound, reasoned news and information.
But what is it like when you write a story and somehow it gets convoluted into this thing, and then the CFO of Goldman has to respond and he says it's fake news? Like,
Yeah.
what do you do? Do people start calling you saying like, congratulations, hey, you screwed up? Like what is that response from people, and what do you do?
Yeah, I mean, what did I do? I mean, I tweeted about it and I said, well, this is exactly, I was disappointed in the response because he obviously didn't read the original story, or he didn't frame his comments in a way that said, hey, it's not just this one report, it's the sentiment out of it. So he wasn't necessarily precise, but, I made the case clear. Listen, this is what our report said. And actually, Marty said after the fake news comment, he said, maybe trading of actual digital assets has moved down the list and custody's become more important. Our strategy might have changed, which is exactly what the story said.
Got it.
And so everything in this world, as you know, emotions fly high. And they calm down in like a week, or not even a week, a couple days.
Crypto is the greatest human psychological experiment I think that we'll probably see in our lifetime, because not only is it all happening in relatively real time, there's prices attached to it, and it's very, very well documented in terms of everything that's being created online.
And that's what makes it so fun to cover. And part of the reason why I loved writing about the space originally, what really attracted me to it wasn't necessarily any sort of political underpinning. There's a lot of libertarians in this space. It wasn't a technology underpinning. There's a lot of really smart computer scientists in this space who love the idea of putting a monetary system in place that's coded, impenetrable, etc. I mean, it's insanely groundbreaking computer science. That didn't attract me either. It was really the passion and energy and liveliness, and getting to tell stories for those types of people that are unbridledly insane.
It's epic. It's
it
epic,
really
right?
is, yeah.
So, all right. So let's go back to somebody tells you some sort of information for a story, right? They're a source and they provide you this information, and it ends up being wrong, whether it was malicious or not. What do you do after that story is either published or you get, kind of confirmation that it was incorrect? Do you go back and say to them, hey, you told me something that was wrong? Do you just drop it? Do you burn them? Like what is the response to that?
I don't know if I've ever have written a story that's been dramatically incorrect to the point of having to go back to someone and take
say,
them
like,
down.
what's going on?
Yeah, no, it's typically before the story will go live, where someone might tell me something that's inaccurate. But again, I've never had a source really tell me something that was inaccurate. I have people sort of dance around the truth, but that's just part of the job. That's part of the excitement, and makes my job fun. It starts with someone telling me something and having to connect the different dots together. And it's typically in that process of connecting the dots that you find people being inaccurate or untruthful. And all of that typically shakes out before any story is up.
For sure.
Yeah.
So let's talk about a couple of things that are happening in crypto, because I think you have a really interesting perspective in that you get to talk to all kinds of random people, right? Everything from traders to people at legacy firms to crypto natives.
Totally.
Kind of the whole gamut. Let's talk about the ETF, right?
Sure.
So ETF's gotten a ton of attention, and it seems like price goes up, goes down based around these applications, denials, potential approvals. What's your take on, does the ETF actually matter? And if so, what would the impact be if and when it gets approved?
I have come to the conclusion that I think the ETF matters for the space, but it doesn't matter for the price. I think it doesn't matter at all for the price. I thought it did. I thought it could have a big impact. But going back a little bit to the run-up we saw in December after futures launched, I think a lot of that was driven by this idea that we'd have an ETF in a couple months.
Yep.
Literally, people thought that, all right, we've been moving at a breakneck pace, and it's going to continue unabated. And, here we are months and months later with no ETF in sight. Probably won't get one in 2018, maybe not even the first half of 2019. There's a lot of work to be done in getting that off the ground, which we can talk about, but it's not going to happen. Now, I don't think that's as important, though, because when you look at the crypto ecosystem as a whole, and you think about how much work we have to do on the actual digital assets themselves, on scaling, on getting a dApp on Ethereum or an EOS that is actually used by people, not just 9,000 active users a month, which I think is the dApp usage, or maybe it's a day on Ethereum. We need something that's actually scalable, actually has use cases, not just for nerds like us, but for grandma and grandpa in Iowa that they can understand. I was at Token Fest this past weekend, and there was a really cool company on one of my panels, and they're sort of trying to position themselves as a decentralized rival to Google. And, you know, it's a bit tangential, but basically I asked them, all right, why would my grandma care? Why would my grandma want to stop using Google to use this thing so she can get tokens? Like, that doesn't make sense to normal people. And we need to, or those companies rather, need to make sense of their projects to regular people. And so that's the impediment we need to get over. A use case for crypto that makes sense to the masses, not an ETF. And so I think if we got an ETF tomorrow, maybe the price would rally a bit, but I think that's all going to go down because you're going to think, all right, now regular investors have access to this market. But it's the same thing as if, you know, you have an amusement park. This is a really stupid analogy. People tell me I'm really bad at metaphors, but I think this is a good one. It's like having an amusement park with some cool rides that are like different than other amusement parks, but they're not really there yet, right? And so you have the ticket guy, and they're all just normal ticket booths. You have to go to the amusement park to get your ticket. And so an ETF equivalent for this amusement park is, all right, now you can buy your tickets online. All right, but if you can buy your tickets online and there's not that many cool rides that excite you, you're not going to go to the amusement park. Likewise, if you have an ETF, but there's nothing that you think is that great about crypto, or you don't understand it, right? If there's still that educational barrier, you're still not going to invest in the ETF.
Yeah, it's changing the mechanism or pathway to owning the asset. It's not actually changing the asset itself or making it more valuable.
Exactly, and it's not making it more understandable to regular people.
Yep.
You know, there are a lot of people out there that are making really great, that are doing a really great job laying out how Bitcoin could be the digital gold, or a rival financial structure, and other cryptocurrencies and digital assets that can also make major moves into chipping into existing businesses, whether it's data storage or search. But that has yet to be sort of deployed and truly tested, I think. Until we see that, I don't think an ETF will make a difference. And it's also ironic, I think, that we're waiting so much for Wall Street to release complex derivative products and other things, as opposed to waiting with bated breath for what's going on inside Ethereum and what's going on inside a lot of these projects. That's where I think we should focus our attention. Ironically, although I love watching the developments come out of Wall Street, and this is something that I've sort of been tackling with the past couple of weeks, I think it's less important, but it is it is important. It's less important. An ETF is important for the ecosystem, but I think it's less important.
So let's go from Wall Street versus like crypto adoption to the regulatory environment, right? So there's all these like lobbying groups, working groups that are popping up that are either led by Wall Street, executives or crypto native companies, individuals that are trying to bridge the gap of understanding education for regulators and lawmakers, right? Are these things good? Are they just doomed to fail? How do you see the working groups and the lobbying groups actually having an impact with the regulations and the regulators themselves?
So Mike Novogratz had something really interesting to say about regulators' impression of this space, and I think it's really smart and true. And it's that this market for so long was so retail driven up until the end of last year. And while there were folks at Wall Street firms looking at it, a lot of it wasn't public, right? And so there was no, back in the housing crisis, regulators could go to their guy at Morgan or Goldman and say, what's going on here with these mortgage-backed securities? And you didn't really have that with crypto because it was so retail driven. And so now they're playing catch up. They're trying to figure this space out. They're giving it a chance, though. They're not completely sending it off to other countries as far as regulatory arbitrage is concerned.
Yep.
They want to see development, but there's a lot of unanswered questions, especially around the ETF. How can we make sure that these markets aren't being manipulated? And when so much of the action is in Asian countries, so much of the volume and turnover is in Asia, and you don't have market data sharing agreements between exchanges, you don't have a FINRA equivalent, you don't have a guarantee, right, that these markets are operating along.
They're just in a standardized, safe way.
Exactly.
Right? So
we
there's
don't
too
know.
much manipulation.
We don't know what best execution is. We don't know how. We don't have those market safeguards that we have in equities. But to be fair, right, equity markets had 250 years to develop.
Mm-hmm.
So it is kind of like comparing apples and as Lynn Martin at ICE said to me in an interview once, comparing apples and neon fluorescent signs, which is true. And we'll get them to be apples and apples probably one day. But there's a lot of questions that the regulators have thrown to the crypto world, and they're not being answered. So on market manipulation, if we can get the exchanges to sort of cooperate and collaborate to create an SRO, which the Winklevoss's Gemini exchange has sort of tried to spearhead with their working group that they've created. But you have Coinbase creating their own with Circle and Genesis.
Yep.
Right. And I'm just here thinking, why are we getting them all together? It's just too much of from my perspective. It seems like the Winklevoss Gemini exchange wanted to get something that could help, because the regulators wanted an SRO type thing. And so here they are. They go, all right, we'll create this thing to help get their ETF on the ground. And Coinbase probably sees it and goes, well, we're not going to join, we're not going to follow Gemini's lead. We got to create our own thing. And it's just troubling to me because we should all just be working together, right? We should all be trying to get to that common goal and purpose, which is sound markets, creating the standards for those sound markets, and educating market participants and non-market participants alike on why this is a valuable space that you should put 1 to 5% of your assets in.
Absolutely. So as this happens, right, we need technologists, obviously, to build technology standards, et cetera. And one thing that I think you and I agree a lot on is like there's a full-on assault by technologists on Wall Street and financial markets, right? The Wall Street legacy organizations, institutions for a long time have dominated that world, and they do things in a very specific way. Technologists happen to think a little bit differently, build things a little differently, and kind of have a different set of ethos and perspective. And we're seeing this clash, right? And it's really the technologists attacking the financial markets and the Wall Street institutions. How do you see that from your perspective, right? As you talk to a lot of these Wall Street institutions, like what's their take on this?
What I think is really interesting, if you want to look at something that can prove or can support a bullish thesis on crypto, right now price obviously is out of the argument. Scaling doesn't look as great, and there's a lot of issues. But if you want something that looks good, look at the talent assault. Look at how many folks from traditional Wall Street, I can list them off, have either dived into crypto themselves or have been taken from a Wall Street firm to the crypto world. You had a guy like Jamie Selway who left ITG to be head of institutional development or sales, I'm not sure what the precise title is, to go over to blockchain, right? You have a person like Christine Sandler leaving New York Stock Exchange to go to Coinbase. Eric Schroe from New York Stock Exchange went to Coinbase. Hunter Murgart went from, I think he was a sales trader at Barclays. He'll probably listen to this and tell me if I'm wrong. Went to Coinbase. You had a guy like, I first reported, 25-year veteran trader who last was at Credit Suisse going to Kraken for their OTC desk. Mm-hmm. I mean, the assault is unreal. And so you have to think, I mean, they're probably making great salaries, right? But there is this sweep that proves, I think, that there is a vision that they see, and there is efficiencies that can be driven by this technology, and potentially maybe even a revolution.
Yeah, I mean, look, forget all the money for a second, right? I really do think that a lot of these people are leaving because they're going to something that's more exciting, more powerful, and it's a global phenomenon, right? And so the whole idea of like the virus is spreading really has become this thing of where the idea of what Bitcoin, digital assets, decentralized finance, et cetera, has spread and captured the mental energy. Right. And it's a thing where once people get exposed to it and they understand it, they can't stop thinking about it. They can't stop trying to figure out how to solve some of these problems. Doing it inside of an institution that's a legacy, Wall Street place just isn't going to cut it for a lot of them. And so they've got to go find somewhere else. That's what they're doing.
Totally. But at the same time, I mean, you see a company like ICE launch back, and I'll tell you, folks inside Coinbase tell me that they think that's, across the crypto exchanges, they're not chasing the competition in that respect, but they do see a serious competitor in Bakkt. And that's because, the trading market structure element of this is so integral to building a sound market, whether it's, crypto or otherwise. And so, long story short, you see tons of institutional firms looking at how they could break in, whether it's Goldman on custody, Numera on custody, ICE obviously on custody, and potentially trading. And that's the story across the street.
Absolutely. No, it makes complete sense. All right, let's do some rapid fire questions
Sure.
here. And then I'll ask you one non-crypto question that I've been thinking about a lot. And I'll let you ask me one question to wrap it up. What's the most controversial thing that you believe in crypto? So the thing that you believe that the most amount of people, when they hear it, will disagree with you.
I guess probably the ETF thing. I don't think we should be worrying about that as much as we do. Maybe that's not controversial, but I'm sure someone might say that that's...
There's a good amount of people that disagree with you.
Everybody is obsessed with this ETF.
You're not.
I'm not obsessed with it.
All right.
It'd be cool when it happens. Gaber would probably argue otherwise.
He's all in on it. Okay, so what is the most important or interesting company in crypto that people might not be talking about?
That people might not be talking about. I reported on a fundraise out of Chicago, a company called CCX, and this company is an institutional platform for spot and derivatives, and they have hedge funds knocking on the door. And so what's interesting about them, one, they raised $15 million in a bear market, which speaks to a whole nother conversation about how, the public markets for crypto, whether it's ICOs or otherwise, really, really bad, but companies are still raising millions of dollars.
Yep.
Anyway, what's interesting about them is the majority of the firms, or no, sorry, not the majority, but a large percentage of the firms that are knocking on their door from the institutional side have never traded crypto before.
Yep.
Which is really insane. And so clearly they've got something going on there. CFTC regulated platform that I think is really interesting. And they have a suite of heavyweight ex-Wall Streeters, a guy named Sam Teagle, who I first reported left Jump Trading. He was recently brought on, and they got a really cool guy running the show who's like 25, super smart. And so it's a company to pay attention to.
All in. All right, man. We're going to take your word for that one. You've got a magic wand, and you can wave it and change one regulation. What do you change?
One regulation. I mean, we're probably on the same boat as this. I think the whole thing around the fact you have to have $250,000
accreditation laws.
Yeah, accreditation laws. I would bring down a little bit. I wouldn't eliminate them, I don't think, but I think especially someone who's younger and has some extra cash, there's no reason why a computer scientist at Harvard who may not have $250,000 net worth shouldn't at least take $5,000 and invest it in a venture capital project he thinks is interesting. I think that's absurd.
Yeah, I mean, look, and it's not so much eliminating accreditation laws, it's just switching what the criteria is.
Yeah,
so today we
exactly.
have wealth as a signal for intelligence, which is ridiculous.
Yeah.
Right? And I've gone on and on about this. I don't need to touch on it anymore. But if we can go from a wealth criteria to a knowledge criteria, I actually not only think that one, it is more inclusive of the general population, but two, it actually probably makes it less risky and a more sound market because everyone is more intelligent.
There's tons of people with $250,000 net worth that were stupid.
Yeah, absolutely.
I can name like 5.
For sure. All right. So this is the first time I'm asking somebody a non-crypto question, but something that I've been thinking a lot about, and I just, knowing you will have a great answer for this. So lots and lots of people are interested around aliens, right? And let's go ahead and just we'll say that, yes, there is some sort of living organisms outside of Earth. So there's aliens somewhere. Do aliens have pets? So are there alien animals or are there just alien humans?
It reminds me of that South Park episode where Earth is like a show where they put a bunch of different species on one planet, and we're all like going after each other, starting wars, eating each other.
Joke's on us.
So maybe we're the pets.
You think we're the pets?
Maybe we're the pets.
All right, I love that answer. The way that it came up was we were talking about aliens one day, and I said, we always talk about aliens like as human equivalents. Right, and they're going to show up, and we can talk to them, hang out with them. They might attack us, whatever. I said, well, what about all the animals, right? And what has that playing?
Do they have animals?
Yeah, I don't know, but maybe we are the pets or the animals,
or the show.
Yeah, well, we're definitely a show. I don't know who's watching, but we're definitely the show. All right, so I let every guest ask me one question. What question do you have for me?
That's a great question. What question do I have? What company I'd like to know what company you think is the most exciting right now.
Ooh, what company do I think is the most exciting? I'm going to break from the question.
Aside from Morgan Creek.
Yeah. Take Morgan Creek out of it. I'm actually not going to go with the company. I'm going to say that it's Bitcoin, right? And the reason being, I think that people are bored by Bitcoin. And I was making the argument to a friend the other day, Bitcoin as an investment opportunity, Bitcoin as an economic, development, Bitcoin as a kind of, a threat to sovereign-backed currencies, etc. It's too boring, right? It's kind of come and gone in terms of the excitement of Bitcoin, and so now we see everyone going into everything from all of the kind of derivative trading to what Wall Street wants to do to enterprise blockchains, utility tokens, ICO. There's all this other like fun, sexy stuff going on. But if you go back to Bitcoin, I still think it's the most interesting, most important development in the space. And if it is successful, right? So it is a complete binary bet in the sense of like a true venture capital bet. If it works, it is going to be insanely valuable, even from here. If it doesn't work, it's going to zero, right? And so that binary aspect of it scares a lot of people, right? But if it does work, it is probably the greatest technological development of the last, 500 plus years, right? And the reason why I think that it's so important is because it is so simple, right? There's almost beauty in the simplicity of Bitcoin and what it is trying to accomplish. All of the intellectual Olympics that happen on Twitter and these other mediums, they kind of just skip over it, right? Because it's like, oh yeah, Bitcoin's a thing. It was one of the first, applications. And so like, let's go talk about everything else that, we're going to try to figure out. Well, if you go back to that and you really sit and think about, out of every single thing in crypto, what has the potential highest impact in a whole different ways you cut it, Bitcoin's still probably the most interesting, most important thing. We just don't spend as much time thinking about that because of all the other sexy, cool things to talk about.
And that's why we're here.
Literally why we're here. Man, listen, this was so much fun. I really appreciate you coming on and
it was a pleasure.
And doing it on short notice and stuff. So we'll have to do it again.
Definitely. Thanks so much.
All right. Thank you.